further ado, let me just introduce everybody on our panel. I'm just gonna, say who they are. They're gonna tell you just a quick snippet about who they are and kind of what they do and what they bring to the table here tonight. And then what we'll do is we'll get to our questions. Again, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A. We'll try to get to as many as possible. We also have a number of questions that we get to. So without further ado, we'll start with Luke. So Mr. Luke Boyron, tell everyone a little bit about yourself, Luke.
Hey everyone, my name's Luke Boyron. I own Cash House Buyer and Bliss Realty. We wholesale the most houses in Canada. We bought about 152 houses last year. We bought over 300 houses since I've been investing, which I started in 2007 with a bungalow at Jane and Finch. And so we wholesale a lot of properties. I was flipping for a while. Acquisition is a strength. My wife and I also have Airbnbs and rentals. We're doing several duplex conversion, coach house builds, and building our rental portfolio that way. So small rental properties. We haven't closed on any large multifamily yet. Small rental properties, 2-3 units, condo townhouses, that kind of stuff is in our rental portfolio. And yeah, that's kind of our background. I basically finished law school, got called to the bar as a lawyer, and then started flipping houses and did 17 houses the first year and just been building up from there. So that's my background, and I've touched upon a lot of different things in real estate. So I'd like to say I have a bit of knowledge in a wide range of areas and very detailed knowledge in a few. And I was very glad to bring together such a wonderful group of people. These are some of the best minds in real estate in Canada. And also quite a range of experience. So I'm really excited to see what tonight brings.
Awesome. Awesome. Mr. Sean Allen.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Sean Allen. I'm based in Southwestern Ontario in the Woodstock region. Primarily what we do or what we have been doing is flips. And I actually, Luke just talked about wholesaling. I'm just finishing up 2 of Luke's wholesales right now that I bought off him. So they're going quite well. But lately we've been transitioning from our flips into more of development and concentrating on our portfolio of buy and holds. But we're still active in wholesaling and flipping as well. And I've pretty much, like Luke, I think, I've pretty much looked at or done almost every strategy that there is available, and focus mainly just on the last ones on the flips and now just transitioning into developments.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Christian, look, I'm a sports guy. I know a lot of last names. I'm not even going to attempt to butcher your last name here. How do you pronounce that last name, Christian?
I pronounce it very carefully. It's pronounced Spielvogel. Just pretend the Z is silent.
Perfect. Yeah, makes sense. Tell us about you, Christian.
Sure. So I'm Ottawa-based. We invest in Eastern Ontario and in the Halifax area in Nova Scotia. And we do mostly commercial style properties. So that would be commercial residential, light industrial, office, some retail as well. So that's largely where we're at. We do this full time. My dear wife is my business partner, and she's fantastic. And my younger daughter just joined the business in September as well. So she's learning the ropes, and she's my succession plan. So that's and then based on Luke's introduction there, saying it's a smart panel, I began to wonder why I was invited. But
oh, come on now, don't worry. You'll figure it out once we get to the questions. I don't know why. Awesome. Last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, Corey McKinnon, tell us about yourself.
Everybody, just like everybody else here, I'm avid, I'm a real estate real estate-aholic and train, I guess in training. So we all love real estate here. And I used to work the corporate world, as a lot of people here used to as well, I'm sure. Been retired or out of corporate for about 7.5 years now. Father of 4 kids, and I do some real estate coaching. We're pretty active. Again, I've done a lot of different strategies. I've done some flipping, some wholesaling, some rent to owns, but at the end of the day, I like the most boring strategy, which is just buy and hold. Multifamily properties. We're developing some bigger projects right now too. I've got some short-term rentals as well, just like Luke. We've got about a dozen. Actually, we're putting our 13th one together right now. So that's done very well. I live in Sarnia, Ontario. So I'm kind of like a Southwestern Ontario value buyer. And I'm just really blessed to be here with you guys all across the province. There's a good sized group of people here, and we're looking forward to answering as many questions as we can for you tonight.
Awesome. So we'll jump right in. One of the questions that I wanted to kind of just kick off right away that I can answer for everybody, because we're going to get this a lot tonight, which is how do we find our leads? So just real quick, and I mean, anybody else can touch on this, but for the most part, we do over $1 million, our company, just in marketing alone. We kind of go into a broad range. We don't have one specific pond that we just fish in. I mean, we do flyers, we do Google AdWords, we do Facebook. We do so many different things. We try to diversify it to find, different people that are looking at different medias and that to try to find our leads. So I thought I would just get that one out of the way, so I can answer that nice and quick for everybody. So very first question I want to throw at everybody. I think we probably got a pretty good range of the people that are on here listening. What advice would you give yourself? And again, going back to when you started real estate, I'm not going to throw a number on there. Whether it's 25 years old or 30 years old. What would you give yourself? What advice would you give yourself to get started into real estate investing? So Corey, what would you say if you could go back and give yourself one really good piece of advice? What would it be?
Yeah, probably the biggest advice that I would give myself back in the past was, if it's a good quality asset in a good part of town, like I mentioned, I'm predominantly a buy and hold kind of a person in multifamily, and I've went down analysis paralysis too much on some properties at the beginning of my career. Like looking back, those are the ones it's like, why was I worried about 10 grand or 20 grand when I wanted to hold this thing for 20 years? So, and you can see what's happening in this pandemic. There's a heavy, quick migration towards real assets, right? Having a great multifamily property is not like Bitcoin. I mean, I'm not a Bitcoin person, but there's always going to be a need for real estate, and with immigration going up, and Canada, there's only so much land in some of the cities that some of the biggest cities in Canada. So I would have just bought more. So I guess that's my advice. Don't split hairs over a little bit. I paid full price in the past for good multis before. Why wasn't I doing it back then? It's always going to be, you're always going to be a step behind, right? You're like, we're setting new all-time highs. So you just have to be comfortable with that and run with it.
Awesome. Sean, what advice would you give yourself 20 years ago when you were 10?
I'm creeping up there. I got a birthday coming up that is hitting that midpoint I don't really like, but I think 5 years ago I might have given a different answer to this, but looking back right now after the last 5 years, I'd say two things. One, get a coach and get condense some knowledge. Find whatever sort of niche that you want to be in, and find a coach to mentor you in that niche. And then the second thing is kind of piggybacking on Corey is I sold a lot of properties early on in my career. I'd buy them and then I'd sell them, thinking that was kind of the only way that I could get some money in order to do another deal. If I had held on to those properties, they would be, like looking back now, how much would they be worth, right? There's lots of other alternative ways to get money for new deals instead of having to sell off your properties. So just advice looking back is get a coach, get a mentor, and hold on to as many properties as you can while you're still acquiring more.
Awesome. Awesome. Really good. Christian.
Sure. I'll just keep it simple, I guess. I think the one thing I would tell myself back when I was 30 is just bloody well get started, right? And it's not just about the paralysis analysis. I mean, Corey's quite right about that. It's just sometimes you have to convince yourself to get going. And you'll discover that this stuff is not really as complex as you're imagining it to be. You can get easily past your fears. So I got started fairly late, actually, right? So I've been at this about 15 years now, 16 years. And I wish I had started a lot sooner. And then the second piece, which Sean touched on, is education. So whether it's through coach, whether it's through some courses, etc., the big difference there is not just the acceleration of your learning curve, but you will learn things that will allow you to structure deals in a far better way that's going to give you a much better return and allow you to invest in a lot more properties. And that was something that I learned later in my career, but it's what fundamentally enabled me to transition from the corporate world into full-time real estate. So that's my 2 cents.
Excellent. Mr. Boyron. You're on mute.
Of course I am.
Days of 2020.
Was crying.
Love it.
I was lucky to start in real estate early. I actually bought my first property when I was 18. And I've thought back, especially when I give some people advice that are starting out now. The biggest thing I think is people are they're unsure what to do, what strategy to start with, and they're looking for a very complex strategy, or to learn everything and then jump into big buildings or something like that. My thought is it's best to get in, like people were saying, take action, but get your foot on that first rung of the ladder. You'll start building equity. You'll start having forced savings through mortgage pay down, and you'll learn from the first property. So I actually like really easy, simple to manage properties for someone's first time, whether it's a condo townhouse, a freehold townhouse, not necessarily I'm not talking about a downtown Toronto condo for $800,000. I'm talking about a $300,000-$400,000 condo townhouse, or a semi-detached 70s build. Big thing is I wouldn't start with a home that's built older than 1950, just because if you're inexperienced, you may not know what you can expect or what issues you might deal with on that and what to look for. But otherwise, 1950s or newer, and just get a simple home. You don't need to be doing a duplex conversion or anything like that on your first project. Just get a rental property, start renting it, start climbing the ladder, start building that mortgage pay down and that equity. And you'll learn so much and just be able to launch off from there.
Awesome. Corey, this question's for you. How important is it to develop a personal strategy for real estate investing? And how do you decide which one is best for you? 2-part question, tough one.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you come up with a personal strategy?
Yep.
It is important, right? Because you've got to either you have some values or a strategy, or else you'll really go chasing after anything, right? So I usually tell people look inside yourself a little bit more. Look at your own personality. If you're a person that's kind of, if you look at the E-Myth Revisited, right, there's different types of personalities in that book. Highly recommend grabbing the book. I know some people are asking what books or what courses would you recommend. Real estate is a bit of a business, right? So that's a great book to go read if you haven't read that one. But if you're that person that gets bored easily and you want you actually like a lot of, variety and just things happening all the time, then maybe that could be your strategy, right? You could be more of a deal connector. You could get involved with wholesaling or flipping, or something that's a lot more of an active strategy. If you're a person that likes more like a stable income, you like repetitiveness, you like routine, then maybe you want something more like a buy and hold. But it's very important to know what's important to you. Like, what do you value? Like, why are you doing real estate? Because if you don't know that, then you're really going to fall for anything, right? You're going to be going down 100 different rabbit holes every week with whatever deal comes into your inbox or that you see on the internet. So I think it's important to actually look at yourself in the mirror, do a little bit of self-reflection work, and know what would work for you long term. Because if you're doing things that don't resonate with your personality type and really with yourself at a deep core level, then you're going to be in friction all the time, right? You're going to be wondering why you're not happy. I'm happy with what I'm doing in real estate. I don't need to have the absolute biggest portfolio in the world. I've got a certain number, which is a landmark number. We want to get to 20 million in holdings, and we're almost there. So, because I know if we could just literally pay that down, and with the equity, we could just lend that out and make a really good return every single year. So hopefully that helps. What was the second part of the question again, Corey?
It was, you basically answered it, right? So it was like,
Okay.
how do you figure out what's best for you, right? So yeah,
Yes.
awesome. So ARV, Mr. Sean Allen, and maybe I'll ask Sean and maybe I'll ask Christian this one as well. What is the best way to determine ARV?
Okay, so ARV, for anyone who doesn't know what that stands for, it's the after repair value. So if you're looking at mainly doing flips or wholesaling, or even if you're doing a BRRRR strategy, you want to know what the product's going to be worth at the end of the day, right? So after you do all the renovations and you do all the value add to it, what is that product going to be worth? So what's the house going to be worth, or the duplex, or whatever? So the best, the way that we calculate ARV, or the way that we find out, is kind of 2 or 3-fold. We know the areas that we're in mainly, so we know what things are selling for. We've got a good handle on the price structure in those areas. We also have good relationships with realtors in those areas as well that can pull comps. Comps on recent solds are probably your best bet on trying to figure out what the ARV is. And if you don't have, access to a realtor, it's really hard when you're starting out, people trying to figure out, how do I contact this realtor? How do I get these comps? You need to start to build those relationships. But perhaps in the start, if you don't have a relationship with someone, you can, get some information from someone if you're going to be asking them to do any purchases for you. So we do mainly comps. We know what the values are. You can also talk to appraisers, and find out some information from them as well. I'd say those are probably my main bets.
Okay, awesome. Christian, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, because I deal mostly with commercial, I find that it's a little different. So when you're dealing with single family homes, maybe duplexes and so on, then I think a real estate agent actually can give you pretty decent comps. Even in this market, which is a little funny, when you get into the commercial side, I can find that realtors will be all over the map for a variety of reasons. It's not their fault, it's just complex. So I have key metrics I use. I use them. Well, let's start with what is an ARV, right? It's when you're looking at it, an appraisal is going to be done. The appraisal is based on either a direct comparison, income approach, or a cost up method. Cost ups are only used as a backup when they can't get the other two to work very well. So typically, you're looking at income based, so it's based on the net operating income, or direct comparison. So, but the principal one would be net operating income. So I use a couple of metrics, as rules of thumb. I use basically an NOI-based approach and a cap rate for that particular area based on the condition of the building. And then I'll do a unit cost as well. So I know what finished units look like in the particular target market that I'm looking at. So in Centertown, Ottawa, it would be in the order of $350,000 for a 1-bedroom unit. And so then the other thing that Sean mentioned is more in my world. So in the commercial piece, you're hiring your own appraisers all the time. So you have relationships with appraisal companies. And I just reach out to them. I'll say, okay, Dan, I've got this particular, or Adam, depending what the class is. I'll say, I've got this particular building in this area. This is what I'm thinking to do with it from a finished perspective. What do you think it's going to be, right? And because I'm doing business with them all the time, they'll just throw me freebies like this all the time. So that's what I would add there.
Awesome. I would say, Christian, you get freebies from the appraiser, but how much is your standard commercial appraisal? How much you usually pay for those?
For relatively small buildings, so anything under about 15 units, it might only cost about $2,500.
Okay, still a lot more than a residential appraisal so that people know.
Yeah, it is, but I really love having control of the appraisers, right? Because they can't defy the rules that they play by, but they can certainly work with you to get what you need.
One of the things I'd like to just sort of add in there, Corey, is, when we're talking about, so I was speaking about ARV mainly for, single family homes or, duplex, triplex. And Christian's talking about, commercial buildings. One of the big distinctions that I'd like to point out, and I just went through this myself, so it's top of my head. We're talking about ARV, you're talking about how much is the property going to be worth? So if you were to resell it when you were done, or after you figured out that value, well, that's what I talk about for ARV, right? So if it's going to be worth 4 million, we sell it for 4 million on market, right? But if you're looking at what's the ARV going to be for in terms of getting financing, that might not necessarily be your number, right? So the banks or the lenders aren't really looking at that 4 million of what the market value is. It's what they are valuing that property at. So they may only, lend to you based on, just for the example of the 4 million, if you could get a $4 million sale on that property, you might only get financing based on a 3.4 million valuation. So I just wanted to, those are big numbers. I'm just using that as an example. Well, it's important for that distinction. So there's a difference between resale and for financing.
Yep. Although usually, Sean, I do it the other way. So I try and squeak out a little more on a resale.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. Whoever wants to take this one. How do you find wholesalers in your area and how do you get on contact lists?
Just call Luke.
Well, that's the easiest one. Sean, you also wholesale, I believe, mainly right now on the East Coast.
No, well, we're doing some Southwestern Ontario. We don't do as much volume as you, but Southwestern Ontario, Peterborough area, and we just started out in the Halifax area as well. So, which is a whole different ballgame. And if there's anyone from the East Coast and you're looking in that area, please give me a message and we'll get you on our list.
Awesome.
There you go. Yeah, as you guys know, we wholesale. So I think a lot of the people who signed up for this, they have the option to sign up for a list. If not, go to blissrealtyinvestors.com/buyers. You can sign up there. For other wholesalers, we actually run a Facebook group. I believe it's called Wholesale and Off Market Real Estate Deals Canada, something like that on Facebook. And you can look through and see, we don't allow people to post, sign up for my buyers list, but you can see who's actually posting properties and contact those people, or they may have a link there. We're fine with people posting links just as long as it's along with the property and not just spamming to get emails, even though they've never bought a property before. And then otherwise, one of the comments there was, look at street signs, etc. If you see marketing from someone who's likely a wholesaler, they could be a flipper as well. Reach out to them and just say, do you wholesale? Could I get on your list? So there's a good amount of wholesalers around. You can, if you look for them, you'll find them and sign up for their lists.
Awesome. Next question. I'm going to do this again in kind of two parts as it relates to two different sides because of who's on our panel here. So what's the biggest risk for beginners investing into rental properties? Who would like to take that one? I'm thinking more like residential.
Well, I can, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, as Luke knows, especially for brand new investors who are going to pick up an initial residential property that's a buy and hold. Single biggest risk in Ontario is getting a bad tenant. And the issue with the Residential Tenancies Act and the procedural aspects that then the Landlord Tenant Board have to follow can make it very painful. And this is even before COVID. So if you have a non-paying tenant, particularly a professional tenant can drag out the eviction process up to 18 months, right? Without any trouble. And these guys know what they're doing. Now, the good news is the caliber of professional tenants is maybe 1% of the overall renter population. The vast majority of tenants are excellent, excellent people. You get maybe 4 or 5% in the gray area, and then you get 1% that are the professionals. And the issue is, if you've got an operation my size, that 1% problem is not a big deal. It's just an operational cost. But if you've only got one door, it's a 100% problem. It's not a 1% problem. So, you know, the advice I would give on that side is your screening processes are absolutely critical. We still adhere to very, very tight screening processes, even in our operation. But as someone who's holding 1, 2, or 3 doors, you've got to refine that screening process.
And I would add to that, so that is the biggest danger when you're holding a rental property long term. I'd say the other kind of risk for beginners or mistakes that people make is that they're trying to, they have a very short-term mindset, or something needs to happen in the short term. Real estate is a long game. So if you're trying to flip and you borrow all of the money at expensive rates, 100% borrowed, you need to sell it at a profit to pay this back, and you need to sell in a short amount of time. If something happens in the market, if you made the wrong buy, if you made a mistake and missed a big expense, that can hurt you because you need to sell it. It's your only strategy at that point, especially if you don't have the ability to finance it and rent it out long term. So, and that was part of why my recommendation was, for first time someone starting out, get into a rental property that you can rent, makes a little bit of cash flow at least, because long term you're going to be safe. Even if you accidentally overpaid for something by $10,000, 10 years from now that $10,000 won't really have mattered. But if you're flipping and that $10,000 might end up being the difference between breaking even or losing money, that can matter a lot. And same thing if you're very expensive financing, you need the appraisal to come in at a certain number to get all your money out. Otherwise, not only do you have the traditional mortgage, you still have to pay this expensive debt, and it kills all your cash flow and then some. So that's kind of where you can get hurt. As Sean said, appraisals, typically when you're getting financing, the appraisal often comes in for less than you would actually be able to sell it for. So if you're counting on that, ARV value on the appraisal, you may not actually get it. And so just kind of short term, I need this in the short term. That's going to hurt you. Think longer term on the rentals, and it helps out.
Fantastic. This is a question for each one of you. It's on financing. We're going to jump into finance here a little bit. What is, and maybe you might not want to tell us, but try to do your best here. What is the most creative way you have financed a deal before? Who wants to start with that? Does everybody want to take a minute and go over what they can and can't tell? Or
I'm pretty transparent about these things. Every single deal has been creative, right? So that's why I'm sitting there thinking, okay, which one do we talk about? And in fact, a business case can be made or broken based on the way that you actually put together the deal, including the finance structure. You can take something that's a non-existent business case, and you restructure how the financing works, and now you can turn it into something that's actually quite profitable in the end. Creative. One that I liked that I did was sort of a conventional, it was a commercial building, conventional first mortgage, got a second mortgage VTB put on the back of that with the first position lender agreeing to it. But then what I did was I had a condition within the agreement of purchase and sale that said, in the event that the second mortgage holder decided to sell off his second mortgage, that I had the right of first refusal. And that enabled me to save about $70,000 on that deal alone because of that, because the guy he needed the capital, and I suspected he did. He was just doing the second mortgage to facilitate the sale. And so he went to a broker, and then he came back to me with an offer, and I said, yeah, okay, I'll buy that out.
That's awesome. I don't know if
Rollin.
this is really all that creative anymore. I mean, it's pretty, it's used pretty widely, but vendor takebacks are a great way to creatively do deals. I mean, in the last little while, I've bought a lot of package deals where it's been, 10, 11, 12, 13 properties per package. But back when I first started, I bought a package of 5 properties from just a small landlord who had basically had 6 properties to his name. He wanted to get rid of them all at the same time. I was able to get 100% financing from him at a very low rate. And then when we added in the prepaid rents at the time of closing, I actually got cash back. So, I mean, there's lots of different ways to work it, but a lot of times vendor takebacks are a lot more flexible than anything else you're going to get.
Awesome. Corey?
Yeah, Sean brings up a great point. Credits on closing. So if people haven't done too many multifamily property closes, if you can close in the first week of the month, then the tenant always pays on the first of the month for the entire month, right? So at the closing table, typically your prepaid credits on rent deposits from last month rents, that should cover a lot of your legal costs and closing costs, right? So I wouldn't recommend trying to close on the first of the month. I actually like the third day of the month, because at that point you can definitely say it's the onus is on the previous owner to go and collect those rents.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a varying level of creativity when I'm not doing big commercial deals like Christian. However, there's been times where, if we're buying a place that's maybe the leases or the rents are lower value, obviously talk with your mortgage broker and stuff like that, but they're like, that's, we want to let you be able to do this for market value rents, right? So get us a lease that shows it's more like market value. We've also done some closings where we wanted to register a vendor take back, and we wait until the property closes and then we register it later. So we keep that vendor take back as a VTB, as a prom note, and then we register it as more of a second mortgage later. It's, you want to play within the rules of what everybody's doing. So I don't play in that. Yeah. So
Play within the laws.
Yeah, for sure.
All the guidelines of what your bank wants you to do, et cetera, right? So, and ask for exceptions. I mean, don't be afraid to ask for exceptions. As you become a stronger and stronger investor and your portfolio is stronger, that's when you might be able to get, things escalated and more exceptions on your behalf for what you're trying to do.
I can speak here for Luke. I know for one of the ways we came up with financing for our properties, we ran one of those car washes out front, $5 where we washed our cars. So we had the whole thing. No, I'm just kidding. Luke, what about you? What could you come up with?
That is not true.
No,
These are great examples too, because everything that was suggested, these are kind of tools you can add to your tool belt to try to make a deal come together. The more tools you have in your tool belt, the more likely you're going to be able to make that particular deal come together. One that very creative that I've done a couple times, but you have to really trust the seller in this. It's when flipping a house. I've essentially partnered with the sellers. So it's the one example was a house in Toronto, high price point. Basically, the double land transfer tax in Toronto would have been about $35,000 if we had transferred it to my name or my company name to flip it. And my financing on that would have been very expensive. Not only, putting at least, let's say 20% down on the purchase with a private lender, but also a couple percent in fees, maybe 10% interest. It would have been quite expensive. So this was a property. The seller in this case was a builder in Toronto who kind of took on a flip for cash flow, but decided it wasn't for him. And he had a good mortgage at 2.95% at the time with a traditional lender. So would have saved a ton of interest using that. So what we did was we drew up basically a joint venture agreement. I essentially partnered with the seller. We joint ventured where he brought the property at a set price, and I would renovate it, sell it through a realtor to an end buyer. At that closing, he would get his set price, and I would get everything above that, whether or not I had, if I'd spent more on renovations than the difference, I would have lost money. If I had spent, less, which we did, we made money. So in this way, we saved a ton of, I was able to pay more. I think I was willing to pay a maximum of $1,050,000 as a flip, and ended up paying 1.1 this way. But again, just land transfer tax alone, because we never transferred title, saved me 35,000, and then saved way more than that in financing costs. So basically, partner with the seller, they stay on title, you get the renovations done, you sell it, and you could figure out a way. It could also be splitting the profits. There's a variety of different ways to do it. One of the key things there is, even if you have a joint venture agreement, even if you do register it, there's some ways to do that. There's still some risk because they're on title and they could try to sell it from under you. So this has to be someone who's a little bit more trustworthy as a seller. But that's I think the most creative deal that I've structured.
Excellent. Question from the group here. I believe it's Daniel's question, which is, kind of sum it up. It's basically provide suggestions on how, on assembling a flipping team, how you decide on the contractors, who you decide to go with, how do you trust them? Who would like to take that question on that?
Yeah,
Not everybody at once. I'll give it to Sean here.
I'll answer that. Yeah, I mean, that's a $1 million question, right? I think most people who are flipping struggle with that, and if you're doing a lot of volume, it can be very difficult as well. I personally have done everything from hiring people internally to work as employees, to hiring crews to, as subcontractors to do the work on the jobs, and not, I don't think there's any one given strategy that's correct. You just have to find what works for you and what works best. But what I did find is, even people that are referred to, you just have to be have to be careful. Even people who are referred to you by other flippers or by other investors aren't necessarily guaranteed to be, great on the job or perfect for you, perfect fit for you. You just have to do it by trial and error. The best thing that I found, and actually what I did this spring, is I actually had a crew that did, I think about 3 or 4 different jobs for me, different flips, did really good work, great guys, great personality, and they were willing to, go above and beyond. And what I did is I actually partnered with them, and I ended up buying and the construction company and bring it into our company. So, bringing the whole thing internally gives you a little more control. It ensures that they're not going out and, typically once you lose a crew and they've gone to work for someone else, it's really difficult to get them back onto your job. So you get a little more control that way. But I think it's just a lot of trial and error and just finding people that you can work with.
Awesome. Anybody else want to jump in on that, or?
Go ahead, Corey.
Sure. I think that what makes this question kind of complicated, it's not just one thing, right? It's like how that contractor carries themselves, how quickly they get back to you, what kind of quotes they give you, go see the work that they're doing, how they treat their staff, how they treat their employees. So it's almost like you need to have a checklist of things that you're going through when you are hiring a contractor or getting ready to work with a contractor on a flip. One thing that I did in the past that worked out well for me, if people want to try it, is I just found out who some of the bigger property management companies were in town and who were the crews that would do their unit turnovers, because those are pretty easy to like refresh a 1-bedroom apartment, because you're usually just pulling out some cabinets, putting down some new flooring, paint, you're just pulling stuff out, you're putting it back in. So those guys actually did a flip for me, and they did it really well because they're just used to the volume model. They're reasonably priced. They're fast at what they did. They were used with working with each other. So if they needed somebody extra, like a plumber, electrician, they had that in their Rolodex. So that could be something you guys could look into.
Awesome.
I think the only thing I would add to what the guys have said, because it was great advice there, is once you've got a pipeline of work for people and you find good people, right? The busier you keep them, right, the more likely they are to prioritize you for your jobs. But if you're given a big piece of work once every 18 months or something like that, you're not going to be high on their priority list. So that's a a key piece there to make sure. And then they'll also help you out. So even if they're not available, they have a network of people that they trust, and they're going to say, well, I can't do it, but I know this guy, and he's going to be able to do this for you.
Mhm. I know
And with flip, I was just going to say, Corey, with flips especially, time is money, right? So if you're waiting on contractors, that's a problem.
Right. I know. We talked one time to a flipper that probably maybe paid a little bit more than what you normally would for the off-market property, and we kind of said to him like, hey, like you probably overpaid for this, right? And he said to us, look, I've got a team. I got a really good team. If I don't keep them busy with something, they're going to go on to that next person, and that next person may keep them busy for the next year. So I would almost rather like break even or just make a few bucks on this, because I'm going to keep this team because it's a great team, and I don't want to go out and look for a new team, right? So I thought that was a pretty interesting way to look at it. Next question. Where do you guys find your cash flow properties? That's what somebody asked in the Q&A. Where do you find these? Where do you find these cash flow properties? Who wants to
Everywhere.
jump? Yeah.
And we're talking city, right? Like city, location, neighborhood, or?
It was a pretty vague question somebody asked in the group. So I mean, it's really any way somebody wants to take this, right? If they want to take it based off geography, or if they want to take it based on, off market MLS, whoever wants to take this, but by all means, take it and run.
Well, the way I look at any purchase is it either cash flows when I purchase it, or I have line of sight to cash flow. It's a fundamental thing that I do. The appreciation is all upside. I do a lot of forced appreciation in our strategies, and it's core to what we do. So when I say line of sight to cash flow, I may buy something at market price or even above market price, but it's a piece of property that I can think about another way to reposition it, redo it. And we were talking about ARVs earlier, right? I'll take a look at the ARV, and as long as I can make a minimum, and I'm sorry, I'm going to throw a financial term here that might be unfamiliar for people, but a minimum 25% internal rate of return, an IRR. If I can hit at least a 25% IRR, then when I do a refinance, I'm going to be able to draw out all of my original working capital. And so for me, that's success, right? And if I can do that, I pull up my working capital and I take a look at the end result after that, and it'll cash flow. So, and I can still do that in downtown Ottawa. I just bought one recently.
Awesome.
I could add a couple points to that, guys. Number one, I think people undervalue the importance of networking. Even though we're locked down, like you still have your phones, right? Like make a point of just getting, working on your network, right? Like making sure you're staying in touch with other people. There's different avatars of people, to get cash flowing properties. It's easier in certain markets versus others, but there's a motivated seller avatar that looks like one thing. But what we've been finding is people that are selling sometimes these days are actually people that have only owned the property for like 2 or 3 years. They've had a good lift and they just aren't meant to be a landlord, and they just want to sell, right? So they're just not meant to be in the game long term. So that's one avatar you can be looking for.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Just go ahead, Luke. Yep.
No, I was going to say, I think where you find cash flow properties, I think as Corey said, there's some areas that cash flow better. I mean, Corey's based out of Sarnia, but I know you don't just have rental properties in Sarnia. That's an area that's a little bit easier to cash flow than in the city of Ottawa, probably. Definitely easier than the city of Toronto downtown. So there's different markets where you're going to cash flow better, but in this market, the price points we're at now everywhere across Ontario, cash flow just doesn't fall in your lap. Nowadays, you make a deal work. It's very hard to find a deal that works. Sometimes making a deal work is by structuring it in a way that, for example, the financing is very inexpensive. It might be a VTB, interest-free, principal-only payments. The deal was barely going to cash flow or not make much sense financially, but now I'm not paying any interest on part of the mortgage. Suddenly the deal works. It might be taking this, severing off a lot to pay down part of the principal value when you look at it. oh wait, now I was able to sever off the lot, sell it, get some money back. The property that I'm renting out actually now cash flows because I paid down part of the mortgage, or equivalent, because maybe you're using the cash elsewhere. But so there's all these ways to make deals work. Sometimes it's a major renovation where you're adding on to it, adding to a building, converting a basement to a secondary suite, or it might just be going to, let's say, Cornwall or Windsor, and buying a property that maybe as a single family home could potentially cash flow. So there's all these different strategies you can take, but you have to figure out kind of what's an advantage, what's a tool in your tool belt, or what's a unique advantage you can use to make this deal work.
Yeah, I think, and just add on to that, Luke, I mean, something that's been very successful for me, and most people are looking for, they want a property in a sexy market like Kitchener or Toronto or Waterloo, but I've had a lot of success in the secondary and tertiary markets where there isn't as much competition, right? Price points are a little bit less, cash flow is still very high, and I've had a lot of success with buying properties in those sort of smaller markets. The only thing that I would caution against that is, what makes it attractive also makes it risky on the other end. When you go to sell the property, there isn't as much necessarily people looking in those markets for resale. That's just one thing to look at, and maybe it's a little bit harder to finance. But other than that, the cash flow is great, and there's 0% vacancy anywhere in southwestern Ontario right now, so everything's equally as easy to rent. So
the only place with vacancy is the city of Toronto now.
That's right. Yeah, that's because everyone's leaving, coming up here.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Lots of good stuff there. What do you guys? What's your advice on best practices on financing off-market deals? Who wants to take that one?
Well, financing off-market deals, in general, I mean, if you're just buying, so there's a few different criteria here. If you're just buying directly from a homeowner, traditional property that's in good shape, you can go to a bank and get a loan. You're still going to need to put, your typical 20% down, but there's nothing particularly different about an off-market property. What gets trickier is if you're looking for a very fast closing. Banks, especially during COVID, take a little longer to get back to you. So you can't promise a 2-week close with a traditional lender. Even private lenders can be slow, but there are many private lenders who I think could reliably do a 2-week close for you. And then when you add in the layer of a wholesaler, some traditional lenders just get scared off by the thought that it's been assigned. Some won't finance the assignment fee portion. And then a lot of times when you're marketing for off-market properties, you're running into really rundown properties, hoarder houses. We had a house with the bathtub full of feces. Banks don't lend on that. I mean, when a bank appraiser goes out, if they mark the property, I think it's something like below average or something like that. If they mark it that way, the bank doesn't want to lend on that property anymore. And then we're talking, I know, Christian, it might be different for you, Christian, the off-market properties, but I'm talking single family. That's my wheelhouse for the most part. So in that case, you need to start going with private lenders. And there's a variety. I mean, we have closed properties in as little as 3 business days, because if you aren't waiting on a lender and the lender's lawyer, in the case of a private lender, to get all of this done, if you have cash or a line of credit readily available to you, your only limitation is how quickly your lawyer and the seller's lawyer can actually prepare the paperwork to get the deal done. So on a traditional wholesale, if that's what someone's asking about off market, most of the time private lenders are going to be the best bet. We actually just started working with Calvert Mortgages, and people get a $500 discount on their fees there, where they will lend 80% of the purchase price, including the assignment fee. So on deals where the assignment fees are larger, that kind of private lender is worth looking at. But in general, private lenders are pretty common on off-market properties, or coming up with a partner who has cash. Let's say if Corey McKinnon has a line of credit on his primary residence and he wants to do a deal with you, well, he might just be able to pull out that money and put it into a deal tomorrow. So partnering with someone who has cash to close on a property, and then you can, for example, renovate it and refinance with a traditional lender. Love the signs, Corey.
Love
There we
it. Love it. Love it.
I think
Need my
the
shark
only
sign.
thing I'd add, Luke, is that, you know, especially for me, I find a good, solid mortgage broker can make all the difference. They can pull all kinds of alternative financing. They can pull private money in for you. They can be a really strong partner, so you don't necessarily have to go and find the money yourself. And I've done deals where I had the mortgage broker pull together some bridge financing for me very quickly, and then I'll just do some other form of conventional financing.
Awesome. Another question from the chat, and again, I'm just kind of paraphrasing it. If you're working, you started working by yourself in real estate and investing in your company. How do you decide when you? So I think a number of the people in this group. How do you decide when you bring on somebody else, or when you make your first hire into the company to start growing it? How did you decide that? Who wants to take that on?
I can
Or
start off. I think it's important to bring on help, like especially if people are working their day job and they're trying to do this as a side hustle. There's only so much you'll be able to do as a side hustle. And in the beginning, for me, it was really just hiring somebody part-time. Like it was my sister part-time at the beginning. You don't have to go and find the perfect offshore VA to help you out with different things. Start with people that you trust. And again, you don't have to break the bank to do this either. And just looking at all the things that are also maybe not your unique talent either. If you struggle to get something done, like if people are still doing their own bookkeeping, I mean, you got to outsource that stuff to just somebody that wants to be a great bookkeeper and help you out, right? So I think too often we're actually trained in school to do everything ourselves. Like there was never a class I took in high school or university or a college that actually taught me to be an effective delegator, but it's a life changer. Even if it's just not cutting your own grass anymore, doing your own laundry anymore, doing your own cleaning and stuff like that, outsource just things that you don't need to do anymore. So don't be afraid to hire someone on your team and just look at it as a monthly expense. If this person doesn't work out, then maybe it cost me $500 or $1,000, but they still did some valuable work, right? So
I think you can look at it from like if you're doing your own renovations for burrs or for flips as well, right? So delegating some of the stuff that, even if you're a handy person and you do floors and you do everything, to get someone else to do that work for you frees you up to find other properties, frees you up to, expand your business. So you're not just stuck on one property at a time, right? Like you will never scale if you're stuck doing the work yourself on each property. It just will not happen. So even just to put that out to to renovators could be your first step.
Yeah, and I would say it also depends what you want to do, because some people want to grow very big businesses, lots of employees. Some people want to keep more of the gross profits rather than have a higher percentage of gross to net profit. So if you make a lot of money but you spend it all on employees on a team, it's not great. If it works great that your team adds a lot of value and you can make a lot more money because of the team, it can be worth it. So you have to consider, then you're not just dealing with the business you're dealing with, you're also dealing with managing people and a team. So it is a question of whether you want to be doing that. I mean, Sean, for example, basically, you own a construction company, you have employees with your partner in your construction company that they're employees. Whereas on my renovation projects, none of them are employees. They're all third parties. So that's also something you can consider. There's virtual assistants overseas. There's virtual assistants in North America or Canada. And especially with everyone working from home, that's a great option right now. There's outsourcing jobs, right? You can have specific parts of a job. Let's say you want to go take pictures of property. Well, there's real estate photographers. You don't need an employee. There are real estate photographers who do that. You could even, let's say if it's in a remote market or a different market, you could even see if there are local realtors, maybe a young hungry realtor who can go and take pictures for you to see this property. So there's lots of ways to outsource parts of the project before you start building a team. So I know the question was, when do you kind of decide to start hiring the team? First, you have to decide how much of a team you even want to hire. What is your business? What do you want your business to look like before you go and do that? And then when you decide to, it's you start, you wear 100 different hats as an entrepreneur, and you start looking at which hats take the most time and which ones are the biggest burden on you, which ones weigh the most because you don't like doing that, you're not good at doing that. And that's when you can start handing off kind of the heaviest, hardest hats for you to wear to other people that specialize in those areas. I think the big mistake is trying to say, here's half my hats, go. That will not work in my experience. I tried that with my first assistant. It did not work. So I don't recommend hiring that way, but I hope that answered the question.
Awesome. Awesome. Anybody else want to add anything else to that? I think that we covered quite a bit there. So
Yeah, I don't want to dilute the great answers that the guys had already. So. But I will reinforce something that Corey said was respect to bookkeeper, right? He brought up bookkeeper specifically, and it's something that a lot of people seem to put off for a long time because they think they're good enough with numbers in a spreadsheet. And a good bookkeeper is essential. It'll be one of your earlier hires.
Awesome. Awesome. Next question. It's about finding money in mortgage brokers. And again, this is from the group, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but how do you go about finding a good mortgage broker? Is it simply just down to who offers you the best terms? Is there anything about a relationship or anything like that? How do you go about selecting the person or the company that you know that you're going to work with or borrow money from? Who wants to take that one?
Well, I guess I'll start. I used to do a lot of my own financing at the beginning. I kind of skipped past the mortgage broker. And a lot of times it's because when I tried mortgage brokers, they didn't seem to have access to the products that I really needed or could get access myself. So it was a bit problematic in that side. And then I discovered there's different classes of mortgage brokers. There's the, you'd say the 80-20 rule. I'd say in the case of mortgage broker, it's probably 98% to 2%. And you'll get a mortgage broker who can sit down with you and do the mental gymnastics with you to figure out how you're going to make a deal work. Not just with all the different lenders that they have, but all the other tools that they have and the way they think about solving the problem. So now I work with, I have two primary mortgage brokers that I work with, one who's more primary than other. I look at her as my trusted partner from a financing perspective. So, what I'll end up saying is, look, this is the kind of deal I'm trying to put together. What can you help me with here? Or how would you structure this? Right. And she'll usually come back with, and she's fast, she'll come back with me and say, we would do it with dip, and we construct this. Then you're going to do a bridge on this, and then you're going to actually put your final thing or product in place here, right? And those products change all the time. So if I was doing it on my own, I can assure you I would not have been as creative as she was. And I know there's other mortgage brokers, for example, in the Ottawa area that are just as nimble. But that was a key piece. And insurance is the same thing too. So I don't know if that comes up later, but insurance brokers, they're not all cut from the same cloth.
Yeah, 100%. I'm with Christian. I mean, whether it's a real estate agent, whether it's a mortgage broker or an insurance broker, I mean, there's tons of them out there that can do the by the book, straight out of the box. This is, one of cookie cutter type thing. But if you're looking for someone specifically for, to be creative, to do, different stuff for investors that you're looking for that can actually understand what an investor needs, there's, it's a very small percentage that actually do that. And I think you find them by just by referral from other successful investors.
Excellent. We kind of touched on this a little bit, but I kind of want to go back to it because we've had a few more people ask the question. How do you decide what area to invest in? Is it just like, oh, I live here, let's invest here? Is it strictly based on opportunities? How do you decide where you invest?
That is a multi-part question. Did you want to go first, Corey, or?
Yeah, I can get it started. I think it's important that people do their own research, right? It's like, when I work with real estate investing students, if they're not sure where they want to get started, if they've never done deals before, like that's actually part of their homework, is go research at least 5 markets and like go pull the demographics, look at the size of the city. I'm not huge on doing cities that are under 40,000 population, just because there's not a big enough ecosystem there. There's likely a couple big employers in town. If one of them goes bust, then that's not great for you as a landlord owning a bunch of empty properties or having to drop your rent. So make sure you're kind of in that sweet spot of, you know, 1,000. I mean, there's different, the GTA is a huge area, lots of subsectors there, but you got to do your own research and see what you're comfortable with, right? Some people want to invest really close to their home in the beginning because they're just afraid they can't sleep at night if something happened 2-3 hours away from them. But as you get better at this and you're more and more confident in your power team members, you can invest anywhere and you can reassemble that power team, because really you can actually reuse half your power team all the time anyways, like your accountant, your lawyer, mortgage broker. You don't have to rehire those people. You're just really rehiring the boots on the ground in that city. So that's just some thoughts to get things started.
Yeah, much like Corey, I'm people who know me know that I'm a very analytical kind of person. So I have a methodology that I use that's too detailed to get into here. But as Corey was saying, you'll take a look at a particular market. I'll be looking for a variety of different things about it, and then I'll decide very quickly whether it's interesting or not interesting. The other thing that I tend to do too is once I decided on, you know, I kind of invest in probably 3 primary markets right now. And once you get to know those markets, I tend not to venture off of them. And that's because you become very familiar with the workings, the valuations, the city and the town processes. So I have personal relationships with city and town officials now. So when I need to get something done or figure something out, I just engage with them, and they respond to me right away because they know me personally. I bought them coffee pre-COVID, but they become very helpful. They also become, interestingly enough, and we didn't talk about this in the lead piece of it, but they also become good sources of leads, right? So they often know when someone's distressed, for example, and they can't tell you exactly, but they can put that person in contact with you. So focusing on, once you've decided on your markets, focusing your energy on those markets makes your operation far more efficient.
Excellent. Awesome. I'm going to get to a couple of questions here from Claude. Claude's fired. I'm not too sure who Claude is, but Claude has fired in a number of questions here. So let me get to a couple of them so we keep them happy here. How hard will you fight to hold a private seller to a firm written deal if they try to get out of it or simply change their mind about selling to you? Who wants to take that one? Yeah, we'll start with you, Luke, because I know firsthand we've come across that situation.
Yeah, we've had situations where, you know, with the volume of properties we do, there's always some deals that will fall apart. We lean towards, you know, if something legitimate happens, if they have a change of circumstances and they can't move, we will let them out of a contract. We're not, you know, here to punish people or push them into something they don't want to do. You know, we've had situations where someone sold the property to us and then their spouse passed away before closing and they wanted to cancel the deal, and you know, we were able to accommodate that kind of thing. On the other side of it, we've actually had to you know, threaten to sue, and in a couple cases start suing some sellers. We usually call that the asshole tax. It's usually when, you know, we feel they deserve it, kind of like, screw you, someone's offering me more money, I'm going to sell to them. That's when we say, well, too bad, you have a firm and binding agreement, we're going to hold you to this. So it kind of depends on the situation on when we're going to do it. And obviously it's also a distraction to running a business. You know, if it's your only deal and they're getting out of it, that might be something you push on. But if you're trying to do a lot of different things and you're going to spend a lot of time fighting with this person, even if you're in the right, it may not be worth the time to you. So we lean towards not pushing it, but there are situations that definitely justify it.
I think it also depends a little bit too on how far down the deal are you, right? Have you assigned it to somebody? Have they invested some time, right? Have they had an appraiser come in there, right? So it's also a little bit of level of effort, and also too what your, if you have assigned it, what level of effort your buyer has done, right? So I know somebody on this panel, we're there with them on a specific one, right? I'm not going to name any names here, but you know, we were there, and yeah, okay, all right, he pointed himself out. So yeah, we weren't good with that, right? Because the reason for us just wasn't, you know, an acceptable reason, and Sean had invested, you know, enough time and money into it. So we're going to do our best to, you know, keep everybody happy, and that includes Sean, our buyer, right? So awesome. So next question, and it kind of piggybacks on this. You know, we hear a lot of the time, oh, it's, you know, it's an emerging market, it's a hot market. Do you guys put a lot of stock into that? Like, you're like, oh, you know, up in Ottawa, we hear, oh, Vinny's it's that next great market. You got to get in there, right? Like, how much stock do you put into that next big market when you hear that, when you're investing? Do you listen to it, or you're just like, we'll see what good deals I get? So who wants to take that?
I guess I'll start that one, right? Because, you know, again, Mr. Analytical here. When I hear about hot markets, usually that worries me, but I will take it as a lead. So if somebody says, well, you know, everybody right now is going for the Moncton, New Brunswick gold rush, right? You know, and there was the St. John gold rush about 10 years ago. And just because everybody's piling in there and the values are going up, it's because everybody's piling in there. So, and if you take a look, you know, at an analytical perspective, you'd say, you know, maybe Moncton and St. John aren't really that ideal, because what they're benefiting from is the rural to urban migration piece. But if you look at the overall population growth of New Brunswick, you realize it's been stagnant for the last 20 to 25 years. So it's going to limit your upside, and there's potential of downside. So I only pick on that market specifically to just prove a point, which is that just because someone is saying it's a hot market, don't be a lemming, don't follow it, use it as a clue, but then do your own analysis on the fundamentals to make sure that that market really is a good market. Ottawa is a solid market, I will say that, right? And if we have time, I'm happy to explain why.
Excellent.
I'll say one of the reasons we're building our portfolio, not only did we just move to Ottawa recently, but we're building our portfolio in Ottawa, is because my philosophy is that government is only getting bigger. And so I don't see, you know, government jobs going away. So I think Ottawa's a very stable city to be investing in personally. Long term, I think, unfortunately, well, it depends on your views, but unfortunately, in my opinion, government's only going to get bigger. But the other thing too is I kind of think of what market to go in as it's not always the fundamentals, unfortunately. It's the same thing as people buying stocks, in the saying that when the taxi driver is telling you what stocks to buy, you probably want to be selling those. I see that push out in other markets too, because people are buying there, prices are going up, but also because it's affordable. So I look at, let's say, Cornwall. I don't necessarily know the fundamentals of the Cornwall market. I know they were hurt pretty badly 20 years ago when the manufacturing sector was kind of dying there. It seems to be coming back. Their prices are up 20+% year over year. And part of the reason for their growth now, and the reason I actually think they're going to have great appreciation, is because they're so much more affordable than Ottawa and the cities around it. So I think the same thing happened to Windsor is happening to Sarnia, happening to London. It's an affordability thing. That doesn't mean the fundamentals, the jobs are all that wonderful in Cornwall. But when the average price is half of the price of Ottawa an hour away, it suddenly makes it attractive. So there's the fundamentals, and then there's also, is just the demand there? But then a whole different question, and Christian would have a better answer than this than I would, is what happens if we do have kind of a crash in the market? Are there going to be some markets that withstand that better because the underlying reasons were there, whereas some other places were just bought for affordability?
Awesome. Opinion question. Somebody asked, what do you think about the exodus from downtown living to rural properties? Is it a temporary event or is it something permanent?
Well,
We're seeing a lot of that here in Woodstock, in the area. A lot of people selling their properties in Toronto and GTA and coming here, like they're selling, $1 million house, coming here paying 500,000-600,000 for an amazing house with a really decent property. They actually have a backyard, and I don't think that that's a temporary solution. I think people are starting to do that, and that's going to become, a permanent solution for a lot of people.
I'm going to take a slightly contrarian view to that. So what we saw in England and in Europe in general is people did move from expensive urban centers to, to villages and so on. But what they had going for them is transportation. So you could relocate, for example, to Windsor or Maidenhead on the west side of outside of London and still get into London in about 30 to 35 minutes because the trains are actually very efficient there. We really don't have very solid infrastructure in this country, not efficient infrastructure anyway. So a lot will depend on what happens with this pandemic. We're all expecting vaccines are going to solve the problem, and I really hope that's the case. There's an entire possibility, right, that there are mutations and we're living with this scenario in some form for a longer period of time. And that would reinforce what Sean is talking about. However, if it actually does get things back under control like it did 100 years ago with the Spanish flu, then what happens is people are creatures of habit, right? We have certain paradigms that we want to work in, social needs, etc. So what we'll probably find is that this will slowly return and gravitate back to models that we're familiar with some variations like telecommuting. Maybe people aren't going to be in the office 5 days a week anymore. Maybe they're going to be 3 or 4 days a week. But I think, if the pandemic fundamentally does solve, we'll start to gravitate back. If we had infrastructure in place like most of Europe does, then I would completely support what Sean was saying.
So, Corey, you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, just I guess with my background in HR and my understanding of human psychology, I'm going to kind of, go more towards Sean Allen's side of things. That like we basically pushed ourselves, like think of online purchases, right? I was on a webinar the other day and we basically jumped 2 years into the future as far as content consumption online and online purchasing, right? Online purchasing was already becoming very, very popular, but like Amazon and all these guys have become busier than ever, increased by 10 or 15% this year. So we just launched ourselves years into the future. And yeah, I mean, I deal with a lot of these markets where people are coming out for the value play, just like Sean. And it used to be kind of like a privilege. Your employer would let you do this if you were a top performer and you were responsible and you wouldn't play too much hooky at work, and if they monitor your internet connection or whatever. But I see this as being an economical way for bigger businesses not to have to pay for office space. And why do people live downtown Toronto? They do that for the vibe, and they get to live in the condo with the gym in the basement and all this other stuff. I just know some people are going to be jaded for life. Like, some people will never leave really Canada or Ontario again. They're just going to only staycation. There's just people that are a lot more paranoid than others. I know there's probably a lot of people on this call that, are not afraid of what's going on. Their risk tolerance is different. I've got friends right now down in Costa Rica. They're real estate investors and they're there and they're having a blast, right? So I think it's going to continue, as a trend and as not that it's going to be an only thing, but I think it's going to always be there and it's going to be bigger than before.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. That's the lovely thing. We don't know, right? We have our opinions and we have our thoughts. We don't know, right? So, if you had to pick, and this can go to anybody as well, and maybe a couple people would like to answer this. If you could pick one real estate investment strategy to start your real estate investing career, what would it be? Who wants to take that one? I might be a thinker. I'm going to make it even harder to a second part. So I hope you guys are ready here. So
Well,
Luke, go ahead, jump in there.
I'm actually going to answer both parts. So the full question. So if you had to pick one strategy to start your real estate investing career with, what would it be? And then if you could only pick one strategy forever, what real estate investing strategy?
He's cheating. Luke's cheating here, guys.
Yes.
Luke's cheating on this. He's
cheating. I think for most investors, I think so on the latter part, which one would you choose forever? I think once you're in the commercial, the multifamily, it's something you would stay in forever. But I think most people never get there. So my answer is that I think both the strategies are the same. For me, it's we're actually going to be talking about this at our next webinar. So it is, Dominique is saying the BRRRR strategy, where you fix up a property, rent it out, and then refinance at a higher value to get your capital back so you can repeat it. But more specifically, Ontario government recently passed Bill 108, and they are basically requiring cities in their residential zones for almost all single family, semi-detached, or like detached, semi-detached, and townhouses. They are requiring them to allow 2 units in the house, so an additional unit in your house plus a detached additional unit. So you're now pretty much all across Ontario going to be allowed to do 3 units. So what I like about that is you could buy that cookie cutter subdivision 70s semi-detached that I was talking about. Of course, depending on parking, because you will want enough parking or good enough transit. As Christian was alluding to, we often don't have that, or good enough transit to make that work, because a lot of units aren't going to attract the greatest tenants without parking. But then you could start with a single family, either detached, semi-detached, or freehold townhouse, rent it out to a traditional, as a traditional rental. And then with time, and as these rules pass, which will be, some cities already implementing it, some cities over the next year or two will implement it. You could then, in the future, as you have a tenant turnover, you could add that basement apartment in, or add a small addition on the back, or add that coach house, which I think is going to be a great opportunity. They don't have to be huge units, but you're going to be able to add on to the existing property you already have, assuming you can come up with the capital for that, and then refinance out at the new value. So I think that's a great strategy. You buy these single family homes, you turn them into 3 units, and it allows you to kind of pick and choose at your timeline on when you do it.
Yeah, I think that's actually really great advice, Luke, because it's sort of a form of land banking right now. So, for example, Bill 108 actually has a lot of different parts in it, but that particular piece, and a lot of beneficial stuff that would support it. But if, say, you're in Ottawa right now, the timeline for the approval of Bill 108 and the implementation of the bylaws would probably be about mid-2022 is my expectation. But if you're buying those properties now, you're basically looking at R1 zones, which conventionally would only be allowing 1, unit on there. With the SDU, you get a 2nd unit, and with the coach house, you're getting a 3rd unit. So now you're really getting a triplex on an R1 zone. That's just huge. And I do agree, commercial is awesome. So.
For people who want to know more about Bill 108, we'll talk about it at the end, but our next webinar, which again is just a free webinar, where it is specifically talking about the opportunities that are coming out of that part of Bill 108. As Christian mentioned, there's a lot of parts to it, but about the 3 unit and the opportunities for conversions, that's our next webinar, digging into that strategy.
Awesome.
I'll answer that, Corey, too.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think, I think it really depends a lot on your circumstances when you're starting, right? Like, in commercial is great to be in, and it's great for wealth building, and it's great for long-term strategy. Same with adding units and accumulating a portfolio. But I mean, let's be honest, most people, when they first start real estate investing, they're trying to get into it. They might not have any money at all, right? They're living paycheck to paycheck. What's the best strategy for them to get into? It might be wholesaling or flipping so that they can generate some cash in order to be able to buy long-term properties, right? Maybe they don't have a network of people, family, friends, colleagues that they can borrow private funds from in order for them to do these sort of things, right? So circumstances, I think, are going to play a big part of where you're going to start. I think what we're talking about when we get to where we're ending up, I mean, for me now, after being in this game for, the number of years I have and doing all the flips and everything that I've done, now for me, it's larger multifamily buy and holds that I'm going to hold on to for a long period of time. And it's also commercial, or like we're building a plaza. It's development projects where we're building, 25 to 50 houses, that sort of thing. Those are your kind of, the end goals. But to start, you kind of have to look at what's your resources and what are you capable of doing.
Okay. Yeah,
To
go
add
ahead.
a little to what Sean's saying, like as a kid, my dad taught me to look for opportunity, whether it was, a beer bottle on the ground or finding a quarter here or there. And if you can teach, I'm actually teaching my kids right now what a flip house looks like. What does a property look like that just doesn't suit a neighborhood, right? So if you can just verse yourself on what an opportunity looks like, what does a property look like where the landlord probably is getting, tenants that they don't like, right? Drive around during large item pickup day, you'll just find like so much stuff at the curb. Those are opportunities where you could go investigate that property. So learn how to be opportunistic, not take advantage, but like know what an opportunity looks like. I think that's maybe something that perhaps is maybe missing a little bit these days. People want the instant result. They want to just pick up their phone and Google it. Just go and learn what these opportunities look like. Go spend a day with a wholesaler or a flipper. These are skills that you don't need any money to do that. You just need some time.
Awesome. So talking about the multifamily, Sean, we got early on, somebody asked, can you discuss your large 54 door unit deal you recently made? How was the deal sourced, financed, managed? You talk about that. People are curious to know how Sean Allen got that.
Sure. So the deal that you're talking about, it's a 54 unit apartment building. It was originally a public school in Ingersoll, Ontario. It was converted by a couple other gentlemen about 3 years ago from the school. They bought it from the school board, converted it into a 54 unit building. So it's essentially, for all intents and purposes, it's a brand new building, right? Everything in it, from the bricks is brand new. All the systems, all the units, and it's fully tenanted. So it was, believe it or not, I don't buy much off of MLS or what's listed, but it was a listed property. I was able to get to it quickly and put an offer in on it, and then do my due diligence. It was financed. So again, 54 unit, fully tenanted, had been tenanted with waiting list for 3 years. Great rents. They're all market value rents. So it was really just turnkey property. I'll tell you the good and I'll tell you the bad. We were able to finance it through CMHC. So we got a 1.78, I think it was, percent mortgage for 40-year amortization. So the payments are extremely low. The cash flow is pretty high. Now the downside to the CMHC, especially during the COVID, because I bought it way back in March, I think it was March or April that I signed the deal. We actually got penalized twice because CMHC wasn't able to process it in time for the closing. So in order for me to get the closing pushed out further and further, I had to pay a penalty to the seller in order to keep the property going. And I had to do that actually twice. So we ended up paying two $75,000 penalties, so to speak, in order to get the property. But at the end of the day, I mean, people look at that and go, well, you just wasted $150,000 for no reason. But if you look at the numbers and where, what sort of value that property is now, it's really just, it'll wipe itself out pretty quickly.
You gotta love and hate CMHC, eh, Sean?
Absolutely. Well, listen, I'll take that rate anytime. 10-year, 40-year amortization, 1.78%. I'm willing to pay.
Absolutely.
Also, Sean, you were recently interviewed about this specific property on Mark Loeffler's YouTube. Yeah. Is that the best place to find it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Mark Loeffler's got a podcast out, And yeah, just I think it was released a couple weeks ago.
I just posted that in the comments, if in the chat, if anyone wants to
Awesome.
watch a video where he breaks down his cash flow and see more of Sean there.
Awesome. Kind of talking about that, how do you guys finance large multifamily deals with private money? Anything else you want to talk about there, or can tell us, or even on the commercial side too, Christian, if you want to talk about that as well?
You know, I don't use a lot of private money when I'm financing commercial deals. I tend to have not much issue getting conventional type financing, usually with alternative lenders. So I'll give you an example. I've got a property that closes in a few weeks, and the kind of mortgage that I'm getting there is a temporary one. It's with Equitable. They have a package right now where they will finance your closing costs at 75% loan to value, and then they will structure it more like a construction loan. So the renovation work that I need to do, we've already calculated what the budget's going to look like there, and they're scheduling it in 2 draws for me. So in that case, you know, I'm going to use my own working capital, but I could have gone and gotten, you know, a second mortgage on one of my other properties. I just happen to have the capital to work with. Where I'll start that construction work, and then I'll use those advances to pay back the working capital I have. And then later on, I'm going to do a refinance with CMHC, much like Sean described earlier. And there, depending how you structure things, you can get up to an 85% loan to value and up to a 40-year amortization if the building is in excellent condition, as Sean was talking about. So that's typically the way I do it. But if I needed the private money, it really wouldn't be very difficult to do.
Quick follow-up question on that, Christian. How rough of a property do you think you could get financing on from a more traditional lender?
Sorry, what's the question, Luke?
How rough, or how much vacancy, or kind of what's the limit on what how bad you could buy a building?
It depends on the lender very much. So if you're looking at all the tier ones, they are skittish, right? And if you're involving CMHC, they really only want to look at finished product or near finished product, because otherwise you're not going to get the loan to value that you want. The product that I was just talking about there, they are willing to accept the value of the property based on market rents and not on as is rent. So that particular property, the actual rents are about half of market rent, right? So even if I did nothing but replace the tenants, I would immediately you double the gross income, and you're going to do far better than that on the NOI because your expenses didn't change. But I'm going to be doing a full renovation on the thing. But in that case, they were willing to accept market rents as condition for financing, and that's the way the appraiser ended up writing it.
It's excellent.
Awesome. Kind of going the other way, we're talking about size here. Is a pre-construction a good buy for a first-time home buyer? And is there a difference? I'm going to add to it. Is there a difference? Would you view a condo pre-construction differently than you would, you know, a 2-story, 2,000 square foot home? So who wants to take that?
I would say, I can start. I mean, so is it different for? It is different if you're buying a home, like a house, land freehold versus a condo, in part because of the timeline. Condo, if you're buying pre-construction, especially a tall building. I mean, my wife and I bought one in 2015 that we just got occupancy in 2020. So, you know, it takes a long time. Whereas freehold, you might own it in a year, sometimes a little more, but and sometimes they push it back. So I think the advantage can be that you could put a small amount down if you're working and saving money as you're working, looking to put the deposits in. A lot of, especially condos, they'll allow you to put 5% down, and then after a certain amount, put another 5%, and then after a certain amount, put another 5%. So they can stagger where you're putting that in. But personally, I think there's way more opportunity, both on upside and cash flow in not pre-construction. If you're banking on selling it as an assignment sale prior to closing, you're only speculating that the market's going to go up. It may very well might. People have become very wealthy doing that, but it also might not. And you still need to ensure that you're going to be able to close on that and deal with it for a while if it didn't go up in value or if you overpaid. So I would say it can be a good, I don't like saying nothing. Every strategy is a good strategy, can be a good strategy, just maybe not the best one. I don't personally love that strategy, but I could understand it for somebody who is not going to have the time to spend in real estate. So they want something very easy, very low risk. They're not looking for much cash flow. They're willing to, take, because if you're buying pre-construction, you're going to take a loss, essentially. I think it'd be very hard to find something that you're not going to take a loss. So if they're willing to float all of that, yes, you can do that. I don't recommend it. But if you can afford it, I would say you can do that. I wouldn't personally recommend that.
Any other thoughts, anyone? No?
Well, if people are looking at that strategy, I mean, if you're just looking for a way for your current residents to appreciate, right? I mean, I always like to go to single, like detached homes, go buy properties in good neighborhoods that, have a good chance of appreciating in good cities, right? So, downtown Toronto condos were great until they weren't this year. There's a huge flood of them, rentals and for sales. So, look at where the true value is in real estate. Like the true value is when you can actually control the asset a little bit more. You don't have as much control over a condo, or when they change the condo rules supersede Landlord Tenant Act, if people aren't aware. So, yeah, don't be afraid to go further into real estate investing and go further down the path. Maybe it might take more time and effort and research and learning, but there are perhaps better strategies out there than buying in a high rise.
And I would add in, actually, because this is specifically good buy for first-time home buyer, the best strategy for first-time home buyers is to find some sort of mortgage helper, some sort of house hack where you can, even if you do end up buying a pre-construction, buy one with an extra bedroom so that you could rent it out if you're willing to do that. If not, find a way to get 2 units, a house that you can build a coach house in, that you can either live in the coach house, rent at the main house, or vice versa. So some sort of that first-time buyer, if you can find a way to help cover your housing costs, it's the fastest way for you to save more money to buy more properties.
Awesome. This comes from Patrick. And I'll read it word for word here. One fear that I have with real estate is that one day I will want to leave my job. That means I will lose my health insurance, which is most important to me. How do you guys cover yourself health insurance wise?
When I left, I'm the same as Corey, right? I worked for 18 years in corporate, and I had, what we called the golden handcuffs, right? Like the place where I worked had probably the best benefits in Ontario, other than teachers, best pension, good pay, right? And that's what helped fuel some of the mortgages in the early years. But I kind of look at the opportunity costs of staying there, and where I was, there's always going to be a ceiling. And I think for most places, there's always a ceiling of where you can go, how much money you can make, and how many hours you can get outside of work. And I looked at the pros and cons of that, and really I just weighed in how much is it going to cost, or how much more can I make to pay for those healthcare costs, right? And so it's just it's a juggling.
Yeah. When you're first starting out and you don't have a lot of cash flow, the thing that you're worried about is income replacement, in the event that you fall ill and now you can't actually continue to push your business, right. Or to cover some of those medical costs. So there are insurance programs that exist. I've had them before. We're large enough now that I self-insure effectively. So I can weather things very well now, but I'm trying to remember, I think it was Manulife that I was using at the time, right? But they will do medical expense coverage and so on. So, and I know there's people on this call that I saw coming by that actually do sell insurance, so I'm sure they can tell you. Well, I see Dominique has.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, I would expect this question more from an American audience, because they have much more expensive healthcare, and the premiums on health insurance are way higher down there. You hear people paying $1,000, $2,000 a month for health insurance for their family. When I first left my job, My wife had insurance, so we were covered there. And even if it wasn't, you can self-insure. We now in our company have insurance. A family, it's about $250 for a family for health insurance per month. And that's quite good coverage, you know, vision, dental, travel, all the paramedical. So there's quite a bit of coverage there. So you can definitely pay for your own health insurance if you want it that way. It may be a little bit more expensive if you're not, you know, we had a certain number of employees signing on, but if even on your own, you can sign up. I think even joining like Chamber of Commerce, there's options to do that, but Sun Life will do it for just you and your family if you don't have pre-existing conditions.
There's something to be said, everybody. Like we're going through it's a health crisis right now that's affecting jobs and finances and all kinds of other things, right? So just keep in mind that even though we're locked down and gyms aren't open and everything, like your health really is your first wealth. I've been able to represent Canada on the sporting stage before, and I have not been to the doctor in like over 20 years, knock on wood. But you know, a lot of this stuff is actually within your control, right? And I've been self-employed since I was 19, so I guess I was just used to paying for, you know, teeth cleaning and all these different things, you know, chiropractor and you know, massage therapy or physiotherapy out of my own pocket anyway. So make sure you have a budget for this sort of stuff. I mean, it's you can't just ignore it and not spend anything on it or not have a budget for it.
Awesome. What advice or what tips would you give to make a cash investor most interested and comfortable investing money in you and your projects? What would you say?
I know, Sean, you've raised quite a bit of money from private investors for all of your flips and projects.
Yeah, we our main source, well, pretty much our only source of funds or private funds until we get situated enough to refinance on a conventional front. Sorry, what was the question, Corey? What's the advice?
Like, what makes a cash investor most comfortable investing in you and your projects?
Well, that's just it, right? They're investing in you. It's not typically investing in the project, it's investing in you. So you need to be, you know, they need to like and trust you, right? That comes from experience, right? They want to see that you've actually done a project and you know what you're doing and you're not losing money. It comes from experience. It comes from relationships, right? And the majority of people that I have as private investors, they come from referrals. And that's why they come from referrals, because people have worked with you and they know you, they trust you, you've done what you said you're going to do, and you continue to do that, right? And so I think it's very difficult for people when they're first starting out, unless it's family and friends or close colleagues. That's where you start. And then after that, it comes from trust and referral.
And I would say when you're starting off, since you don't have, you know, Sean has done, you know, 4 million flips and can show you before and after pictures and, you know, how much he made on them. He can show and prove a track record. If you don't have that, it may make more sense to give up equity. And we had, I don't know if we'll get to them, but we had some questions about joint ventures. But even if you take 10% of a deal, that you are putting in blood, sweat, and tears into that deal to show, you know, an equity partner who's going to make the majority of the profit, that you can put in the work. You now can add this to your resume as your track record. Look what I've done. Look at how successful it was. Now I have the opportunity to do it with you, and you can invest funds with me. So maybe the second deal, you're not borrowing because you don't have that proof yet. But now the second deal, instead of 10%, maybe you can get 20 or 30 or something like that. And then you can work up to the point where, you know, you've got enough of a track record that you can convince people that you are worth investing in.
Awesome. Good answers. Getting back to the multifamily, how does somebody go about finding or what do you recommend on somebody finding commercial and multifamily opportunities? Any advice for somebody looking there or thoughts?
I've done I mean, basically multifamily and commercial, like office and industrial and stuff like that. They're all a little bit different, but they're all kind of the same. I'd say half my deals came off MLS. The other half, though, you can't underestimate the power of networking. So with commercial, it's less about door knocking, but it is very much about, getting to know who the players are in your map market. Thanks. That's awesome. I get the triple. So, even with people that I've coached along and stuff, I'll just say, listen, go to the area of your target market. Just start going into the cafes and the shops. Obviously, it's a little harder right now, but even just doing that, you go in and start talking to people, get to know who's doing what in town, and they've literally just said, well, I was thinking to sell up, right? And it was a mixed use property in the particular case I'm thinking of. But I'd say that if it wasn't on MLS, all of those other deals have come through people that I know, and I just pull the threads and then I figure out, like one that we were just talking before this call. It's an older building. I knew the guy had this portfolio. He wasn't sure what he was going to do. He doesn't want to invest in that particular town anymore. And so I said, well, do you want to sell that particular asset that I was, and he said, yeah, okay. I think we should have that discussion, and we're moving it along. So networking is my number one thing.
Awesome. Great.
And
Yeah,
also, don't be afraid to do some detective work, right? This is what the big REITs do. Like the big REITs will literally find out who owns the building, if it's not already owned by a REIT, and they'll just go and find out who the owner is, right? So, if this is something you really want to do, go find out who owns the building and just find a way to get in their sphere, get something in their mailbox, have a conversation with them. It's one of those things. It's going to be a little bit more work, but it's definitely worth doing.
Well, there's a quick tip to that. So Corey, you hit on a really good thing there. In most cities and towns, there's a roll book, right? So if you know what the property is or the address, you can find out the address of the owner, all right? And then go to that particular owner.
Yeah, I've hired people many hours to go sit with the roll book.
Awesome. Yeah, it's funny you say that, right? We were talking earlier about finding contractors and that, and you actually, I just remember based on what you guys said, a really good piece of advice for finding a contractor was somebody said, I used to go to Home Depot at like 7 o'clock in the morning and just watch the contractors come in, right? And have conversations, give them their cards. And that's how she found a lot of her different contractors, right? So just a different way if you're looking at it. So I thought that was really good advice. Right now, is it a good time to buy a house? Somebody just asked that. I know it's a pretty vague question, but anybody can take this and go any way you want with that. So it's a wide open. So go ahead. Luke.
Okay. This is. Did you want to go, Luke?
No, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So a lot of people say hot and cold on these kinds of things. I look at it as every acquisition I make has a business case, right? I need to know where I'm going to be, and I need to know what my cost is going to be. And you can buy in any market. This market might just be harder. That's all. So the deals may be a little more sparse, but they're there. Heck, I've done two acquisitions in the past 4 months on the larger multifamily side. And that's in a hot market where there's lots of bids and so on. But I knew what my business case is. And that's the key thing. You got to figure out what your objective is, where your bottom line is. And then either the deal is there or the deal is not there. So.
Christian, what is your portfolio like? I have to ask.
Why?
Buying more building. How many? If you're okay answering it, how many units or buildings do you own or manage now?
Yeah, I don't think I want to go into that, right? Okay. So because I find it to be kind of a question that really isn't very. It leads people down the wrong path of thinking.
Well, sorry to put you on the spot there.
Not at all. I get asked that.
A few, Luke. I think that's the point. I think he's saying he's got a few, right? So he's got a few. Yeah.
But it's really, I've got office, I've got light industrial, I've got commercial residential, I've got mixed use. I've got a couple of houses that just kind of came along with other deals. I didn't target them specifically, but yeah, that's the swap that I have.
I partially want to answer, is this a good time to buy a house, with some of the most oversaid things in real estate? First one is, what's the best time to plant a tree? Same as buying real estate, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that's the best time to buy real estate, same as it was best time to plant a tree. Another one, it's not about timing the market, it's the time in the market. There's some of the most oversaid things. Dominique had a great comment. It's the dollar cost averaging. To me, you can't know when you're going to be at peak of a market. You can't know when you're going to be at the bottom of a market. You should be consistently looking to buy at all periods. Obviously, if you're buying a lot of volume or multiple properties a year, or at least one a year, you can average that out. But if you were to buy one property every June for 30 years, on average, you would do pretty well. So if you're trying to time and you wait and you wait and you wait and you wait for a drop and 10 years pass, price, if you were trying to buy 10 years ago and waiting for that drop, you're still waiting, and prices are several times higher now. So my thing is, it's always a good time to buy real estate, but as Christian was saying, it's looking for the right opportunity. Sometimes it's harder than others, but it doesn't mean don't buy. It just means buy right.
Yeah, don't get caught in the emotion.
Yeah, it's not a great time to bid $100,000 or $200,000 over asking unless you're dealing with mega million-dollar property. But if you can always get a sharp deal on the buy, and it's a strategic, like Christian was talking about, there's a strategic reason why you're buying that building. You see yourself holding it long term. It's got a great business case. It can weather it can weather the storms, right? Your mortgage pay down, you will pay this thing down over time, for sure.
Excellent. Joint ventures, I just want to touch on that a little bit, and we got a little bit of time left here. What are you guys' thoughts on joint ventures, and any tips of somebody that's getting into a joint venture or thinking about getting into it? What are your thoughts?
And the question went along with, they seem to be helpful to get started when you don't have capital, but hard to secure if you don't have experience. So it's coming from someone who is newer to real estate, and as a way to kind of finance their first properties, wants to do joint ventures.
Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I think along the lines of what Luke was saying earlier about giving someone 10% or 20%. If you are starting out and you don't have access to a lot of capital, you don't have access to a lot of lenders who will lend to you just based on return, then it's more important to get into the game than it is to figure out how much you can retain from that. So if joint venture is your solution to do it, then by all means, right? And it also allows people to I know lots of people in the game that love to do joint ventures as a way to scale their business, right? So they can't do it all on their own. Their solution is to joint venture with a lot of people and take a portion of that profit or a portion of that ownership and just keep expanding that, right? That's one way to do it. The other way is kind of what I do, and just have multiple lenders and just pay returns, right? So there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? And joint ventures are definitely a good alternative, especially if you've got a good network of people that have resources behind them that can allow you to get cheaper mortgages, access to mortgages. It's a great alternative.
And there's, it's easy to get in these Facebook groups and everybody's putting their hands up. Who wants to JV? Who wants to JV? Not too many people are actually asking the question of like, what should I be looking for in any kind of a business partner, right? Like, you have to have similar risk tolerances. You have to be bringing different, skills to the table. Like, there's got to be some synergy of why you're wanting to joint venture as well. Play it out over 5 years, 10 years. Would this actually be a good business relationship? So it's ask some different questions too, as well, when you're thinking about joint venturing. Awesome.
I got a couple of questions left for you. One question I want to ask, Luke and I were at kind of a networking event, and Sean's kind of part of the group, and somebody that's extremely successful, they kind of thought, what does success look like then for a career? So we have a lot of people that are here listening, and they're at various stages of the real estate investment. is there an end for you guys? Like, and anybody can answer this. Do you have an end where you're just like, once I get to, I own, 200 doors, I'm good there, right? Like, where does success end? Where do you retire, or what does that look like, right? If any of you guys have thought of that or kind of have that end goal in mind, like, who wants to talk about that?
Yeah, it's a very individual thing for everybody, right? And it's something that very early on you have to ask, and I think it was Corey who said it, was you have to ask your why. And your why, if you're looking strategic planning, is the equivalent of your mission, right? And I'm a firm believer in trying to understand that piece, because if you don't understand why you're doing it or what your mission is and what your vision is, right, then you're just going to wander around, right, from a business perspective. So because it tends to be different, I'm a very ambitious person, okay? So I don't really think of, getting to a certain point and then I'm done, but that's me. That's the way I'm personally wired. So for me, it's to continue to grow and to scale because I enjoy it and I like doing it. But I will tell you where I have figured out where my endpoint is I've built something that is going to be a multi-generational wealth strategy. That's why my younger daughter just joined the business back in September. She just finished a degree in economics. And I'm training her to do this. So my aspiration is for her to eventually take control of the operation and take it where she wants to go, right? And then I'll participate, but then she will be the one in charge. So leaving it in good hands, and hopefully she can pass it on to her children. So that's my personal answer.
Awesome. Who else wants to jump in on that? Yeah, Luke, go ahead.
I would say it's a little bit like looking, what do you want out of life? I think for myself, and I think for most people, I want to be happy and I want to do good in the world. I would say, I can't speak for the whole panel, but I believe I can, that this panel could stop buying new properties, stop working, and be fine financially. So it's not that it's, no one on this panel is working to pay the bills. So it's a choice. It's either want to do more, or it's something that completes them. So for me personally, I could stop working and live off of, what I have built so far. It may take some restructuring on exactly how everything's set up, but it would be possible. But what I do also fulfills me. I find real estate growth, the things we can do with this, very fulfilling. So there isn't a set number that I'm going to stop at, but it doesn't mean that I'm always going to be looking for more and more and more. It may be bringing some things back to reduce risk, to have lower loan to value across properties and things like that. So there's different stages in investing. But I would say at different points, I think, and I don't know if you guys agree with this, but I want to do good in the world and I want to be happy. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm looking to do. And if real estate can provide that, I think real estate is giving the opportunity to provide that.
Awesome. At the end of the day, guys, life is meant to be lived, right? So I'm sure everybody here's had a loss in their life of some sort. I've lost friends from high school, when I was in my 30s, and I just turned 45. So, we do this sort of stuff so that we have the ability to do what we want in life, and totally resonate with what Luke is saying about doing good and enjoying yourself, right? Like every day we're blessed to be able to do this stuff. We're blessed to be able to connect with over 100 people today on a Zoom call. I know personally, again, just like Christian, I'm an ambitious person. I'm going to be doing real estate deals into my 60s or 70s or probably 80s if we're around and we're not run by robots by then. But I just love the art of the deal, and I love buying assets. And some years we buy more, some years it's more about family. I got 4 kids under the age of 8 right now. It's a busy house, but I want to be, definitely setting this up for the next generation as well, and the generations beyond that.
Yeah, and you guys are touching on something that I think is really important, especially since we've got a large audience here, is integrity and ethics in what we do as investors is really, really important. And I bring this up because I come across this all the time where people are using what I would call unethical approaches to things in order to make a buck. And we have to recognize that we're in a business where we're touching other human beings, right, and affecting their lives. So, those who know me know that I'm very much a proponent to ethical investing. So just because, we may have ambitions, and Corey was touching on this, we need to make sure that we stay on the right side of the ethical boundary all the way through.
Awesome. Awesome. We still have lots of questions to get to. We said we would stick to our allotted time. We've got a couple hundred people on this call, right? So the panel, I think I speak for everybody. I'm just looking here in the chat. Everybody has done a phenomenal job here, and I appreciate everybody coming in. To our panelists, we've got a lot of people on here. Is there anything you'd like to ask the audience? Is there anything the audience can do for you? And also is there anything, if you have anything that you can offer the audience, if you want to, by all means, but so feel free. I'll go around the horn here and see if there's, if there's anything you'd like from our audience, or if there's anything you want to offer. So let's start with Sean. Sean, is there anything either way?
Yeah, well, let me tell you what I want from the audience. I want them to take action, because far too many people are on these webinars. They're going to RIAs, they're going to webinars, they're doing all this stuff, and they're learning and they're analyzing, and they're doing that until they're blue in the face, but they aren't taking action. So you're here for a reason, and if that reason is for flexibility, if it's for wealth generation, if it's for whatever reason to get out of your job, or get more financially ahead, the first step is to take action, and then it just springboards from there.
Awesome. Corey.
Yeah, I'm gonna resonate or add on to what Sean was saying. Like, I'm sure Christian and anybody else here that's been in the game for more than a decade or two. This is my 16th year real estate investing. The access to information back then was so much more difficult to get. I mean, and I guess there's a flip side of that, right? Where there's so much information out there that you could just go down a rabbit hole and never actually do anything. So, real estate is a very forgiving asset class. If you have some intelligence going into it, and you buy in the right neighborhoods, and you're just buying a quality product, right? So just don't be afraid to get involved in the market, with your comfort level, right? I mean, every city's different, every market's different. You don't have to go buy the 54 unit building in the beginning. I mean, start with a house that you can house hack, start with a duplex. I went into a sixplex as my first building, and that was uncomfortable for me back then, but I've been able to refinance that building 3 or 4 times now, and it's more than double in price. So, I don't know any other asset class that can get you these kinds of returns. So don't be afraid to get into the game.
Awesome.
I'd also add that Corey does take on coaching students. I believe Christian occasionally takes on a few as well, but I know Corey coaches quite a few successful real estate investors, so that's an option to reach out to him there. Sean wasn't asking for it, but I know
follow me on social media. I'm fairly active on social media. I want to be putting out content for people to get value from. So
and provides a lot of value there. I know Sean, always has flip projects on the go. So if someone is interested in private lending, possibly following along Sean on a project to see what he's doing, and maybe lending to have access to him that way, that would be a good way for someone to explore. So you might want to explore that.
Awesome. Christian, I'll leave you till the end there, Luke. So Christian.
Sure. I'm going to start with just building on what Sean and Corey had said, because that really is probably the most important message. You'll find that, you're going to have hesitation on your first deal, and you're going to find a million excuses, right, why it doesn't work. And you have to write those excuses down and then figure out how material they really are in your life. But what you will find is once you start, it's like a flywheel, right? And it just enables things, because you'll learn so much on the deal itself. And as Corey said, it's a forgiving asset. So in the long run, any painful mistakes you make at the time just slowly, go away. There's opportunity for tragic mistakes, I won't lie, but for the most part, it's actually pretty good asset class. So once you get going, once you're doing the deal, you're going to learn a lot, and that's going to enable you. And then you're going to want to be able to focus on doing that on a repetitive behavior so that you get more efficient at it. And then something that I'll offer out, I guess, is a lot of you know, I like helping people out. So I'm very active on Facebook groups. I'm in Ontario Landlord Haven, Ontario Landlords Watch, Oslo, all these different groups. And for me, it just gives me satisfaction to be able to help other people out. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions. You know, I'm happy to help out in that respect. Just not this week's a little busy, so I'll be a bit slow, but yeah. So.
Awesome. Mr. Boyron.
Yeah, I really appreciate everyone coming on today, joining us here. All of the questions, we had, I don't know, almost 100 questions. We obviously couldn't cover the majority of them. There's not much I'm looking for myself, so I would say I'd appreciate if people could follow my YouTube channel. We basically haven't done anything on there yet, but the plan this year is to do a lot of content on there starting probably in February or March. So if people could sign up now, I'd really appreciate that subscription boost. It would help out. So I'll drop the link there in the comments.
Awesome. So last note, again, thank you to our panelists. I think that was absolutely fantastic. Our chat is absolutely blowing up here with just fantastic comments from everybody. I think everybody did a wonderful job. I hope a lot of people learned something. If you didn't learn something, then your volume was not on, because I think there was so many things to learn here. I will leave it with and echo exactly what Sean said. Don't just, listen, take action, jump in. It's the best way to learn, right? You're not going to learn sitting on the sidelines. You're going to learn in the game, right? So everybody, thank you very much.